Welcome to Truah's 2021 Gala. I'm Rabbi Jill Jacobs, the Executive Director of Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. Truah brings the moral voice and the power of more than 2,000 rabbis and cantors and their communities to standing up for the human rights of all people in North America, Israel, and the occupied Palestinian territories. And we know in this moment, we need moral voices more than ever. When the founders of this organization dreamed up Truah almost 20 years ago, I don't know that they could have imagined the events of the last few years. An autocratic president undermining a free and fair election and fomenting a white supremacist insurrection at the Capitol, the recent bloody war between Israel and Hamas, the creeping annexation of the West Bank, and the desperate attempts of a prime minister under indictment trying to hold on to power at any cost. The United States being forced again to reckon with our legacy of racist violence as hundreds of thousands rose up in the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Dante Wright, and countless others. And of course, a global pandemic that exposed once again the deep racial and economic inequities of our society. Even as widespread vaccinations give us new hope, we acknowledge our losses. I'd like to take a moment to remember the too many people in this country and in others who have died. It's an unimaginable number, yet each one is an individual with grieving friends and family, including some of you. Let's take a moment now to hold these people in our hearts and to recommit to working for justice and equity in their memory. These deaths remind us of the work still very much ahead of us, and we couldn't be doing that work with a better set of people. I want to start by offering a special thanks to the Truah staff and board who keep our gears in motion with holy chutzpah and brilliant know-how. When the COVID crisis hit last year, we knew that this wasn't just a public health crisis. It was also a human rights crisis. Our incredible staff have organized both our members and the broader Jewish community to flood the phone lines of members of Congress, of governors, and of the White House to demand the release of vulnerable incarcerated people and of detained immigrants, to call for relief plans to include everyone, regardless of immigration status, and to insist on protective equipment for farm workers and for other essential workers. And we've advocated for Israel to fulfill its responsibility to vaccinate Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. Thank you especially to our board chairs, Rabbi Nancy Weiner and Rabbi Ken Chasen, as well as the rest of our visionary board for your continued guidance. Please join me in thanking our staff and board with silent applause. We'll be doing that a lot tonight. Thank you to our honorees, Rabbi Lila Kagedan, Marc Elias, Rabbi Rachel Greengrass, and Rabbi Oren Hayon, whose courage and devotion to fighting for dignity, equity, and justice inspires us every single day. I know I speak on behalf of the many smiling faces in this Zoom room when I say how delighted we are to celebrate you tonight. And thank you to all of you for your ongoing partnership, to our host committee members for your generosity, to our fantastic ambassador circle who helped us gather you all tonight, to our dedicated members and supporters, and to everyone, all of you celebrating with us tonight. You make Truah's work possible, and you strengthen our collective moral voice. Please join me in a round of silent applause for all of you. Thank you. We're deeply grateful. As we begin, we would like to offer a land acknowledgement. I'm zooming in from Upper Manhattan, where I can walk from my home to see artifacts left by the Lenape people, on whose traditional territory those of us in New York live and work. We acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. In naming this history, we honor the truths, wisdom, and resistance of Native communities on whose land we gather. I encourage those elsewhere to take a moment yourself to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of the land you call home. Now, a few words on technology. I know everyone's very used to Zoom at this point, but just a couple of notes. If you select Gallery from the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll be able to scroll through the faces of all of our attendees. I also encourage you to use the chat feature to say hello to everybody or to say hello to friends, to give a shout out to everybody, and to use reactions to tell us that you're having a great time and celebrating our honorees. But just one note of caution. We've left on the feature that allows you to chat privately with individual attendees, so that you can say hi to your friends. Our staff won't be able to see these chats during the actual event, so we trust that nobody will use this feature for harassment. But if there's an issue, please chat either Jamie Marvin or Bennett Decker on our staff. They're about to write into the chat so that you know who they are. Closed captioning is available at the bottom of your screen by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the window and selecting Show Subtitles. We're also glad to welcome 2 ASL interpreters, Liana and Maria, this year in an effort to make this event maximally accessible to our community. If you drop off for any reason, you can go back to the link in your email and rejoin the call. And if you're having any other technology issues, you can call the support number that's going into the chat box right now. Thank you again for being here with us. We'll kick off our celebration with a brand new video about Trua in COVID times that I hope inspires you as much as it inspires me. Please enjoy.
This is how we do it. We show up, we make noise, we create change. But now, everything's different. And maybe that's okay. We need change. This is how we make it. This is how we stay hopeful. This is how we show up, even when we can't show up. This is how we pray. This is how we dance. This is how we get loud. No matter who tries to silence us. This is happening because we are winning. This is how we win. This is your Judaism. These are your rabbis. This is the moral voice we need. This is how we do it.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rabbi Ken Chasen, and I am honored to be the co-chair of the board of Trua, the organization that mobilizes and trains clergy and their communities to fight fiercely for dignity, equity, human rights for all people. I have been a proud funder and volunteer leader for Trua for so many years now because I treasure being part of a powerful network of over 2,000 rabbis and cantors across North America who share a passion to take our Jewish values from the Bima and the Beit Midrash out into the world where they are meant to create justice and compassion and honor for all of humanity. Alone, we struggle to get our voices heard and our mission fulfilled. Together, we make a mighty difference in a world that needs it. And that is why I want to say to all of you, thank you for joining us here tonight. It is a tremendous gift to see so many faces in the Zoom room in celebration of our amazing honorees and in support of Trua's life-affirming human rights work. Under 10 incredible years of the trailblazing leadership of Rabbi Jill Jacobs. And can we just pause and give a little visual love to the amazing Rabbi Jill Jacobs? With the blessing of Rabbi Jill Jacobs's incomparable leadership for this past decade, and with the power of your support and dedicated partnership, we have doubled down in defense of democracy and Black lives. We have continued to resist the moral bankruptcy of mass incarceration, immigrant detention. We've fought for a just rollout of the COVID vaccine. And you know what, folks? We are winning. This year, we saw a major blow to the carceral system in New York State with the passing of the HALT Act, which effectively eliminates solitary confinement for juveniles. and pregnant people and seniors and people with mental illness. We also made history when we partnered with essential workers to win a $2.1 billion emergency survival fund for undocumented people, those recently released from prison and other excluded workers in New York State. You enabled this work, my friends. You led with your Jewish values, and we are so grateful to have you at the table. Of course, there's still so much more work to be done, despite the relief we are all surely feeling from having a non-authoritarian administration in the White House. And honestly, aren't we all still recovering from 4 years of that actually having to be an aspiration instead of an assumption? Still, the profound brokenness of this world continues to reveal itself each and every day. Systemic racism, rampant xenophobia, economic injustice. This is all still in the air that we breathe. And so how do we pause for just this one night to celebrate our victories and our heroes? Well, first, we do what we Jews do. We sing. And so, here to energize us, to bring spirit, vibrancy, and yes, even joy to all of that holy work ahead of us is renowned musician, singer, composer, founder and director of Hadar's Rising Song Institute, my dear friend and fellow practitioner of Jewish song, Joey Weisenberg.
Thank you so much. Kol ha-neshama tehalel, ya hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalel, ya hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Each other, but we can kind of connect anyway. Kol ha-neshama tehalel, ya hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalel, ya hallelujah. Thank you so much, and thank you to Trua.
So good. Thank you for bringing such spirit into the room, Joey. I was definitely singing along, as I saw many of you were as well. Let's give a silent round of applause to Joey. My name is Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann. I'm very honored to be with you tonight, this evening, as a representative of the Trua board, which I've been proud to be on for the past 4 years. Tonight is about the power of pausing. Pausing to pay attention, to celebrate, to uplift, to appreciate leaders like Marc Elias, Rabbi Rachel Greengrass, Rabbi Oren Hayon, and Rabbi Lila Kagedan, whose voices, whose Torah, and whose profound courage bring more justice into this world. Tonight we pause to elevate the moral leadership of Trua's risk takers, from those working quietly with extreme diligence to making seismic shifts in their communities, to those facing down pharaohs in the streets. So let's celebrate, let's lift our glasses and our voices. Right now, a link is about to go into the chat box to a word cloud that we are going to create together. What are 2 words that come to mind when you think of Trua? So go to the website posted in the chat, or if you want to open it on your phone, you can go to www.menti.com and type in the code 36994419, which is also going into the chat. Either pathway will take you to the same thing. Open it up and type the first 2 words that come to mind when you think of Trua and our amazing honorees. And together we're going to fill this Zoom room with power and joy. And don't just wait for somebody else to do it. There are 272 people here. We should have at least 444 words. All right, I'm seeing justice. I'm seeing courage. I'm seeing power. And in the chat, I'm seeing tomatoes and justice. We'll let this word cloud continue to grow. This is what Trua is about. I love this. Love, strength, leadership, prophetic. This is what Trua is about. This is what this community stands for. So let's take the power and the energy and the love of Trua and put it now toward ensuring the long-term sustainability of Trua and of our holy work. Tonight, we're going to raise $20,000 here in this digital world via text message to sustain the struggle for human rights. We're going to do it right now, step by step. Everybody, you have permission. It's not Yom Kippur. Take out your phones. Okay, so you're going to start a new text message. I'm going to do this with you. Start a new text message to the phone number 917-970-1782. Again, that number is 917-970-1782. You'll see this number and instructions also in the chat. Okay, next, you're going to type in the amount of your gift in the body of the text message. You can also include a message which will appear in the Zoom chat shortly. So you could, for example, type in like $180 in honor of tonight's inspiring honorees. Please give as generously as you can tonight, whether that is $18 or $1,800. Your gift matters, and we are truly grateful. If everybody on this chat tonight were to give $100, we would overshoot our goal. So everybody participate. Okay. Everybody got your text message with your amount and your message? Now hit send. And you should receive a response right away on your phone with a link to the payment form. Click on that link to fill out your credit card information and indicate your gift amount. This will only take a moment, but the reward is so powerful. And isn't that what we are celebrating tonight? So join me now. We're going to take a few moments and wait so that you can fill in your payment information. In a few moments, you're going to see our fundraising dashboard go up, which is going to be fun, and we will be flashing to it on occasion throughout the evening to show our progress. Hey, there it is. Let's see. So far, it says raise $398, target 20,000. We all let's get this started, people. I actually typed in the number wrong, so I have to go back and redo it, but we can all take this time now to do it. This is the time for it. Great. If you really, really hate texting, you can also go to trua.org/give now to make your gift there. That link is also going into the chat right now. Thank you so much for joining this effort. I cannot wait to see how we do. Great. Danny reporting a little bit on what's coming in, 360, 25. Oh, all right. All right. We've already raised 3,000 of the 20. All right. So everybody, thank you. Keep it coming. Great. So before we turn to our honoree panel, I want to encourage you to please take selfies of the night and tag us on Twitter or Instagram at Trua Rabbis, which is also going into the chat right now. We are going to disable the chat function temporarily so that we can give our esteemed honorees our full attention. I am delighted to turn the proverbial mic over to Leah Donnella, who will introduce us to our extraordinary honorees, our human rights heroes. Leah Donnella is an editor on NPR's Code Switch team, where she produces and edits the Code Switch podcast alongside a team of journalists of color. It's a great podcast. I'm a listener. The podcast tells stories of how race and identity interact with every aspect of life in the United States. Leah also created the Ask Code Switch series, where members of the team respond to listener questions about how race and identity and culture come up in day-to-day situations. As an African-American Jew, Leah personal experiences participating in Jewish life as a Black woman. We are deeply grateful that you could join us, Leah. Thank you for being here. Before you take us into the panel, will you tell us a little bit more about your connection to Trua and to this work?
Hi, yes, I will, and thank you so much for having me. And hello, everyone. So, as Rabbi Lizzie just said, my name is Leah Donnella. I'm so excited to be here tonight, in part because my understanding of what it means to be Jewish has always been tied to the idea of demanding a more just world. And that really comes from my mom. She's here tonight. I'm excited to see her. My mother is very religious, but to her, that has never meant lighting Shabbat candles every week or knowing the words to every single prayer or having the absolute dopest Seder in the entire neighborhood. Although if anyone has ever been to her Seder, you know that that is true. But being religious to her has meant fighting day in and day out to protect some of the country's most vulnerable people. So for 40 years, she's worked as a public defender representing people who are on death row. And growing up, when she talked to me and my siblings about her work, it was so often connected to her beliefs about what it meant to be Jewish. It meant being in community with oppressed people. It meant being willing to occupy an uncomfortable and unpopular position in society, and sometimes even in our own family. And it also meant continuing to work despite little forward progress and enormous setbacks. So when I first learned about Trua a few years ago, their mission to protect the human rights of all people made perfect sense to me. This, I thought, is what Judaism is fundamentally about. and what it has to be about. As Rabbi Lucy said, I'm an editor at NPR's Code Switch team, and my team tells stories about race and identity and the ways that all of our competing identities affect how we interact with each other. And it was this work that first brought me to Trua. I interviewed Rabbi Jill Jacobs about why it's so very difficult to have productive conversations about Israel and Palestine, and why Rabbi Jacobs believes that that work is imperative, and why it's imperative to work through those challenges and reckon with the realities that we're all living with. The work that she and so many others at Trua do may at times be unpopular and uncomfortable and slow to make change. I think we've all seen that in the past month, the past year, probably for a lot of us over the course of a lifetime, we've seen how slowly change comes and how hard won it can be. And I think these challenges exist for everyone who's trying to fundamentally transform the way our society works. And they certainly exist for the people that we're about to meet and about to honor. So each year, Trua honors people who have devoted their lives to advancing and protecting the basic human rights of all people. Tonight, Trua honors 4 such people who have taken personal and professional risks to be leaders in their own communities and in the world. They're all going to get a chance to be in conversation with one another in just a few minutes, but I'm going to just start by introducing them and presenting their awards. So I'll begin with Trua's Rabbinic Human Rights Hero Award, which honors rabbis and cantors who live their lives by this code. Our first recipient of Trua's Rabbinic Human Rights Hero Award goes to Rabbi Rachel Greengrass. Rabbi Rachel Greengrass is a rabbi at Temple Beth Am of Pinecrest, Florida, and president of the Rabbinical Association of Greater Miami. As a representative of the RAC Florida, Rabbi Greengrass led a coalition of organizations that brought Democratic presidential hopefuls to bear witness to the largest detention center for immigrant children in the United States. Their lobbying and protest work resulted in shutting down the Homestead Detention Center, reuniting many of these children with their families. Rabbi Greengrass also helped bring the Florida Rights Restoration Campaign to the Jewish community to work on restoring the right to vote to individuals who had been convicted of felonies and had served their sentences. The Rights Restoration Bill made it onto the Florida ballot, which, as many of us will remember, was voted into law in 2018 and restored the right to vote to 1.4 million disenfranchised Floridians. So, Rabbi Greengrass, can you show us your award, please? Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Our next Rabbinic Human Rights Hero Award goes to Rabbi Oren Hayon. Rabbi Hayon serves as Senior Rabbi of Congregation Emmanuel in Houston, Texas. And in addition to his congregational work, Rabbi Hayon is involved in the leadership of numerous interfaith, academic, and social service organizations, and currently serves as chair of Refugee Services for Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston, which operates one of the largest and most robust programs for resettling political refugees to the United States. Rabbi Hayon, can you show us your award? Thank you for the work you do. Our next Rabbinic Human Rights Hero Award is presented to Rabbi Lila Kagedan. Rabbi Lila Kagedan is an ethicist and educator working in academic, pastoral, and clinical settings. She was ordained in 2015 by Yeshivat Maharat, where she became the very first Orthodox woman to claim the title of rabbi. She's the director of biomedical ethics and a professor of bioethics in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry of New York Medical College. And Rabbi Kagedan is committed to justice work at the intersection of faith, anti-racism, education, and health. She serves on the Clergy Interfaith Coalition for the City of Chelsea, Massachusetts, and serves as the co-chair of the Disparities in Health Working Group at Cambridge Hospital. She's also on the committee addressing social determinants of health and racial health disparities at New York Medical College. Rabbi Kagedan, can you show us your award? Thank you for the work you do. And now I'm pleased to present the Raphael Lemkin Human Rights Award to Marc Elias. Marc Elias is a nationally recognized authority in campaign finance, voting rights, redistricting law, and litigation. He's the chair of Perkins Coie's political law group and the founder of Democracy Docket, which is a platform for progressive advocacy and information about voting rights, elections, redistricting, and democracy, and which transformed the way millions of Americans cast their ballots and led to record voter enfranchisement in the 2020 election. During the 2020 election cycle, Marc's voting rights practice brought more than 150 cases in 30 states, totaling more than 120 victories in courtrooms around the country. And following Election Day, Marc led the charge for 67 post-election cases on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Biden campaign, winning 64 victories against the Trump administration's unfounded claims of voter fraud. Marc, will you please show us your award? Thank you for the work you do. So even though we can't all be together in person, we really wanted to give all of the honorees a chance to be in conversation together to talk about their work, their communities, and the Jewish values that they bring to what they do. And I've gotten the chance to speak to each of the four of you, which was such an honor. And all of you have spoken about how Judaism has informed your desire to do justice work specifically. So I wanted to start by asking, what Jewish values or teachings have guided you in your pursuit of this work? And Rabbi Greengrass, let's start with you.
Thank you. You know, I think it's hard to read the Torah or the prayer book and not be inspired to do this work. But there's two texts in particular that like haunt me in the back of my head. And one is from Esther, Esther 4:14. Mordechai goes to Esther and asks her to speak on behalf of the Jewish people to prevent this genocide. And he says, you would think he would say to her, you have to do it, only you can do it. But what he says is, if you don't do this, help will come from somewhere else, but who knows, perhaps you are in the palace for a moment such as this. And I always think of my privilege and my relationships and what is before me and how can I step into it. The other text is from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, which I actually have a plaque over here on my wall, which says, in Judaism, faith is not acceptance, but protest against the world that is, in the name of the world that is not yet, but ought to be. And that is the work of Judaism, is getting us from the reality to the vision.
Rabbi Chasen, can I turn to you next?
Thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to be here this evening. I feel so grateful to Trua and to so many friends and family who are here, and to all those who are honored this evening. I'm so very inspired by you. And to that end, Rabbi Greengrass, I am so moved by the same pasuk, by the same verse in Megillat Esther, in the scroll of Esther, that idea of umi yodea imla et kazot higat lamalchut, this idea of perhaps that you were invited or you came to this moment for a reason. And it has always inspired me, really. It's made me think of some teachings from my late father, Ian Kagedan, about the work of stepping into something that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with, but you do it anyway, because you know it's the right thing to do. And as you said so beautifully, whether it is stepping into privilege or opportunity, or just saying yes and not standing by idly when we watch injustice, and using our voices as best we can to advocate. The other pasuk, the other verse that comes to me, which I love so very much in the high holiday season, in Yamim Noraim, is from the book of Isaiah, the verse "Vehaviotim el har kodshi v'simachtim beveit tefilati," that I will bring them to my sacred mount and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. And the verse ends by saying, "Kiveti beit tefillah yikareh lechol ha'amim," the idea that my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And this idea of inclusion and coming together and being able to share space and do work together, even if we don't agree with every single piece of what the other folks might agree to, but we come together for a common cause, and we come together to do this real work of what it is to be in community. These two verses motivate me and really guide me.
Rabbi Hayon, I know you didn't always plan to do the work that you're doing today. So how do you respond to that?
It's a great question. Thank you. And also mazel tov to the others that are with me tonight. I am truly inspired and just really moved by the work that you do. I've said to my congregation a couple of times in the past that if I had to boil down the entire message of the Torah into a single sentence, I would say that the message of Torah in its entirety is, I'm lost and I want to come home. To me, I feel like that is the entire Jewish story in a single sentence. I'm lost and I want to come home. It is the chronicle of our national yearning to be in a place where we can be at home. And that's an expression of what happens in our families, in our tribes, in our relationship with God. It's so central that we spend every year, slowly, one piece at a time, reading and rereading the national epic of our people, trying to make our way to a place where we can be free and at home. And what's especially captivating to me is that every year, when we get to the part of that story, when we reach just to the very edge of the border, just to the brink of the promised land where we'll finally be free, the plot breaks and the story starts all over again, back to displacement, back to the experience of rootlessness and homelessness. So I think if I had to pick a line from Jewish text, I would probably pick maybe the most familiar line from the Passover Seder, which reminds us that b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, we are obligated to see ourselves as having personally been liberated from slavery. But the way that I would read this line is that b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, doesn't just mean that once in a generation or even once a year, you're supposed to come to this awareness and realization of your past, but that b'chol dor v'dor means in the entire breadth of your generation. In other words, every day of every year, with all of those by your side that are making their way through time, you are to walk through life with the awareness that your freedom is only a temporary gift.
I think that idea of freedom being a temporary gift is actually reminds me of something that you talked about, Marc, in our conversation. And I'm curious, as someone here who has talked about how your work is very informed by Judaism, but you're not a rabbi, how do you think about how your work and your faith are connected?
So first of all, thank you everyone for having me, and I am inspired by hearing all those words, and I'm thankful that you came to me last rather than first with the question. I think that there are two ways that I think about how Judaism has affected the work that I do. The first is that the Jewish people are the people of laws, and we're people of laws for several reasons. First, because Abraham literally at the beginning made a covenant, which brought with it rights and responsibilities. It may be a legalistic way to think about it, but it is foundational to Judaism. In Isaiah 10, God talks about what will befall people who make unjust laws, what will happen to people who rob the poor, and talks about the importance of the law to living a good life, being righteous. More concretely, in recent times, the laws are oftentimes what stands between Jews and bad things happening. And so we have a unique obligation among all people, both because our religion is founded on law, but also because we have benefited from those laws. And we embrace those laws because we need those laws to protect Jewish people, and we need to make sure that those laws also protect others who are suffering at the hand of discrimination or at disenfranchisement or are being oppressed because of what they look like or what they believe in. So to me, it's foundational in all of the work I do, and it's foundational in how I was raised.
Thank you. Now, I think that's actually kind of a nice lead into my next question, which is all of you have talked about how for the case of the rabbis here, you've all talked about how you are leading purple congregations that have a wide diversity of political thought and people on many different ends of the political spectrum. And Marc, you talked about how your work has become perhaps polarizing, it's become partisan, even though it's work that shouldn't necessarily be partisan. It shouldn't be a political sort of fight to get voting rights for every person. So I'm curious about how all of you think about how to work in community with people of really different backgrounds and perspectives. And sorry, that was my alarm. Rabbi Hayon, can I start with you for this one?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, thinking about this question, I mean, it's something that I think our nation has spent a lot of time thinking and talking about over the last few years. I think probably everything novel and interesting that could be said about the impact of social media on the national discourse has already been said. But all of those things are true, that the way that we learn about the world now has this sort of insidious tendency to flatten the diversity of ideas. And so what I'll say is actually, in my experience, the experience of leading a congregation, leading a community in a purple city, a purple community, actually, I think it is in a sense a little bit easier because in a community like ours, the people that might disagree with me politically are my neighbors and they're my friends. And that reality forces me or forces anyone to sort of resist the tendency toward stereotyping and caricaturing people that have different political ideas than you do. It's really easy in a lot of ways to demonize people on the other side of the aisle or the other side of an issue when your community is very homogeneous. But in a blended community, you are forced toward innovation, you're forced toward creativity, and forced toward cooperation, collaboration. And I'll say, in the case of my work with refugee resettlement, this has been actually a wonderful way toward sort of cross-aisle, cross-partisan collaboration, because this work of helping to resettle political refugees in our city is one of the most transformational, deepest expressions of patriotism and American values that I can think of. And it's a wonderful way to connect with people that might vote or think or move differently than I do, because it's our way as a nation to rescue people who are imperiled in other parts of the world, people who are political or cultural dissidents, foreign nationals who assisted us as translators and guides across the world, victims of some of the world's most unthinkable violence and discrimination and pain from all over the world. Our nation brings them in by the tens of thousands, which is, I think, the most effective global marketing strategy that there is for the promise of democracy and American liberty. And it is a way of bringing together people of diverse ideas and diverse political postures as a reminder that even in cases when we can't fix systems of suffering and oppression around the world, there is still something that we can give together as Americans to people who are victimized by those systems. We can offer them the gift of safe harbor, and we can give them the gift of freedom, which is the thing that makes us who we are as North American Jews.
Rabbi Greengrass, I saw you nodding earlier. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I'm very inspired by Rabbi Hayon's work and all that he stands for, actually, everybody here. I will say one of the things that resonated so much with me was when he said, "These are my neighbors." And I think so often when people say they don't want to hear politics from the Bima, it's because they don't want to feel like their home, this place where they feel that they are part of something bigger than themselves, where they feel divine love, doesn't want them if they don't vote this way or feel this way about a particular issue. And so the Torah is a political document. If you're going to actually talk Torah, you're going to talk politics from the Bima. But I always try and think about being a vessel of that love and remembering that my congregants who don't agree with me still hold the same values as me. They still care about the stranger. They also care about security. They care about education. They care about equality. They care about justice. Their expression of that looks different. And you know, the Pew study just came out last week, and one of the things that it said really was that people care more if their Jewish grandchildren, or if their grandchildren are going to vote the same way they do, than if they're Jewish the same way they are. So the polarization of politics is really pulling families apart, and it's not what we want in our community. We want our community to come together to do justice. And I think when we can approach each other in a loving way instead of a confrontational way, although there's moments for confrontation, of course, that we are more likely to get people who wouldn't listen to us to at least have the conversation. And I have had congregants who very much don't vote the way I do say, I don't agree with you, but I love you and I will protect your right to do this work.
I'm really curious, Marc, how you're hearing this. You, in our conversation, said that you can be at times correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but the least compromising voice in the room. So I'm curious about how you think about your role in these conversations.
Yeah, I am almost always the least compromising voice in the room. And I didn't begin that way. That's not who I am by nature. It's not what the majority of my life and career has been. But you know, people don't wind up listed as righteous in Yad Vashem because they were compromising. They wind up there because they were righteous in the face of compromising. They confronted because they saw what was wrong and they took a stand to make it right. So one of the things I always say when I talk to audiences, because I talk to lots of audiences, some that are very progressive, some that are less so, what I tell people when they ask what can they do, what I say is we each have a town square. Now you all have more than a town square. You have a bima to literally stand in front of an audience. And what I ask people to do is when they have that town square, and their town square may be, in your case, a congregation, other people it's social media, and some people it's their dinner table. When they're talking to their neighbors, don't turn away from the confrontation. Don't not talk about it because it's uncomfortable. Talk about it because it is necessary, because it is the righteous thing to do. It is our obligation as Jews, it is our obligation as Americans, and it's our obligations as citizens to stand up and say, what you are doing is wrong. What you are allowing to happen to people is wrong. It's not a difference of an opinion. It is wrong. When you see, when the people aboard the MS St. Louis were sitting out in the ocean and turned back to their death, that was not a question of how do we communicate across the aisle. It was the difference between right and wrong. And when we see families that are separated at the border, whether they're separated by Democrats or Republicans, and we are seeing them put in inhumane conditions, that is wrong. And so to me, I'm the least compromising voice in the room because I think it is very, very important that we not allow, notwithstanding the fact that we're all, dressed up and, with people who can donate $18 or $1,800, that we not forget that the people who we are here to fight for are the people who have the least. And they can't afford us to have polite conversations all the time. And they can't afford for us to turn away from using our platforms to talk about right and wrong.
Thank you. And Rabbi Kagedan, I mean, you've had to have some of these really difficult conversations with people, I mean, your whole career, but I imagine especially in terms of bioethics in the past year, I imagine has been a really challenging and difficult one. So how are you thinking about how you have these hard conversations with people in all of your different spheres?
Thank you. I feel so moved by what all of you have shared. You know, health is the great equalizer in some ways. I grew up in Canada. I'm a very proud Canadian. I'm a dual citizen, but I admit I'm a very proud Canadian. And so healthcare is something that I value tremendously, and access to healthcare. And COVID was this fascinating pulling back of the curtain. It was the great equalizer. It didn't matter really on some level where you were coming from. And yet we know that there were massive exposures of racial disparities in health in terms of mortality rates of people of color when it comes to COVID. And although the vast majorities of funerals that I officiated at over the past year, of which unfortunately there were more in number than I care to share, were in the Jewish community, I can say that I saw people and visited with people either at Zoom or at the bedside from all backgrounds. It's the great equalizer. And at the same time, working or functioning in an echo chamber is easy. It's simple. And I will admit, both in my work in the Orthodox world in the rabbinate, of course, it would have been very easy and sort of lovely if entering the rabbinate wasn't really a big deal, gender-wise. Of course, just doing your work. That sounds amazing without any controversy. And at the same time, what I've learned over time, both in healthcare and in the rabbinate, and I think in the world in general, is I'm not interested any longer in functioning in an echo chamber where everybody just says yes all the time and agrees with you. I don't think that's how we get the work done. And there's a lot of work to do in this world. I think the work gets done by facing the other. In other words, being in conversation with people whom we know at the very beginning we do not agree with. In fact, they might be the person who really gets under our skin and who we almost say to ourselves, oh, they're not even worth the conversation, as you just said, Marc. But actually, instead, that impulse to say they're not even worth it, I'm not going to get into it with them, is exactly the moment to sit in conversation. And really, more than sitting in conversation, to just listen. This is something that I have worked on and doesn't come easily, but to just listen to the other, to hear where they're coming from, also to share. And I think these are the critical pieces here when we see injustice, not to stand by, to listen to the other, and to do the work of it. The blessing that we say in the morning, La'asok b'divrei Torah, to really be busy in the work of Torah, as you said, Rabbi Greengrass, this is a political document. To do the work of Torah is uncomfortable, is challenging, is exhausting, is scary, it's isolating. Sometimes it can be very lonely. And yet that, I think, is the work that we're called to do. I'm always reminded of this scene in one of my most favorite books, Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. And if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. And certainly for all rabbis, it's like a good self-help book and also a guide, our own guide. There's a scene where the protagonist, Reverend Ames, is walking through the town and he sees lights on in people's windows. And he knows what happens in all of those homes, and only he knows. And that is something that clergy have, which is unique in the sense that we can all see what goes on in the lives and hearts of people, no matter their background, and maybe see them in a different light, even if we might think we vehemently disagree with them, and just listen, and then maybe challenge. And so I think bringing these things together, the listening, the facing that which is uncomfortable, the rejecting our echo chamber, even if it's a really comfortable place to be, the noticing of what are the great equalizers, what we have in common, will really drive us to do our best work and bring about change.
Thank you. I have a whole other list of questions that I would love to ask all of you, but we actually have just 1 minute left. So in just a real quick lightning round, I would love to ask each of you to go around and just share maybe one thing that you would like people to know about your work, or that you want people to stick with by the end of the evening. And for this one, Marc, do you mind starting?
Sure. I'd ask you not to grow tired. I know that it is easy to feel like we have been living through 4 years of Donald Trump, and now is the time to exhale. But right now in state legislatures around the country, Black and brown voters are having their voting rights taken away. They're not affecting most of you, and that's good, but they are affecting real people. And we need to not be tired of the fight. We need to not be tired and think that the work is over. The threat to civil rights and voting rights for Black and brown voters, for young voters, remains as real as ever. And it is our obligation as Jews and as citizens to keep up the fight.
Rabbi Hayon?
Yeah, I think one thing, I think maybe to connect with what Marc said, I think I want to remind and encourage people that wherever they are, there are people in their communities and organizations that are doing really good, important, sacred, life-saving work. I want to again shout out my dear friends at Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston, who has created an extraordinary multi-faith network of people that are helping and saving and welcoming political refugees to our community. What I led with at the beginning was this line from the Haggadah about needing to see ourselves in every generation as having been the beneficiaries of liberation. And in many of our Jewish stories, this is an invitation to remember the ways that we have suffered and been oppressed over the years in many generations. I guess I would encourage folks tonight to remember that there's also another side of that story as well. In addition to the stories that all of us have in all of our communities and all of our families about exclusion and oppression and displacement, all of our families also have stories about people and communities, organizations, and nations that welcomed us and took care of us and made us feel whole. And we can be the welcomers. We can use our positions now as insiders to welcome those who temporarily find themselves on the outside. And we can reach out our hands to those who are waiting just outside the golden door, yearning to breathe free.
Thank you. Rabbi Kagedan?
Thank you. To me, and this is something that I don't want to sound preachy because I really remind myself of this every day, that freedom is not something to be taken for granted. Freedom is not by chance. It's something that we must be grateful for and acknowledge and work to continue accepting and then doing something with it. It's not just a gift. And many of us come from backgrounds where there wasn't freedom. I certainly grew up with very important people in my life who survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, and to never take that freedom for granted. But once you get that freedom, to continue to work to preserve it and to give it to others, as you said, Rabbi Hayon, and to remember very, very deeply that we were strangers. Nothing is a given. And to use that in a very productive way, both to maintain our own safety, dignity, and then to give it when possible to others.
Thank you. And Rabbi Greengrass, I'll give the last word to you.
Yeah, so Rabbi Tarfon taught, it's not up to you to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. So if I wanted to leave you with something, I would say, just show up. I know that after George Floyd's death, which we just observed the yard site yesterday, I couldn't sleep until I went out, even though I hadn't left my house to go to the grocery store, until I went out and I protested and I was at the rallies. look around and see what is broken and show up. You know, when we found out about the detention center, you know, I said, I can drive there. It's only 40 minutes away. I can be there. And this is such an amazing honor that Trua is doing for me and for all of us this evening. But I know that this is the work that feeds my soul. And I know that it feeds so many Jewish souls. So I would just say, look around. It's a lot easier than you think to show up, to say, I want to help. You don't have to finish the work, but you are not free to desist from it.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all of you. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And again, thank you for all of your work. Let's all, everyone watching, please give a silent round of applause for all of our honorees tonight. And also thank you so much to our interpreters. They've been working so hard tonight and we really appreciate it. And now I am so pleased to introduce our next very exciting musical collaboration, which has been specifically composed, especially for this evening, which is amazing. So this is a collaboration between Cantor Lisa B. Siegel of Kolot Hayenu in Brooklyn, HUCJIR Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music cantorial student, and 2019 Trua Summer Fellow Zevi Berman, and their incredibly talented producer, Eitan Cantor. So we hope you enjoy, and thank you all again.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rabbi Ayelet Cohen. I am so proud to be a board member of Trua. I want to extend deep gratitude to Cantor Lisa, Zevi, and Eitan for this extraordinary offering to our celebration tonight. Our cantors are powerful leaders in their own right, and we are grateful for the opportunity to lift up their voices as partners in this sacred work. So let's give them another round of silent applause. Thank you also to Joey, Leah, and our awe-inspiring honorees. I am deeply moved by your moral leadership for helping to redeem and repair this world. I've been on the board of Trua for more than a decade and involved long before that, and am so grateful to have Trua as a gathering place, a locus for activism, and a guiding and steadying moral voice when our world is in turmoil. So thank you. Let's have another round of applause for our human rights heroes. If you were moved and inspired by what you have seen and heard tonight, please text your gift to 917-970-1782. Remember, put the number in, and then in the body of the text, put the amount you're giving and any message. Please help us ensure the work of Trua continues. Honor all of tonight's human rights heroes and make sure their communities know that all of us are standing with them when they take risks and when they teach the Torah of justice. Every single gift matters. Give on your phone, give online. If you haven't done it yet, do so now. If you can give a little more, please do. Marc Elias just asked us not to get tired. And Rabbi Tarfun and Rachel Greengrass reminded us to show up. There is a lot of work that still needs to be done. And tonight we still have about $10,000 to raise. So please be like our human rights heroes and keep on going. Thank you. We're now going to try something a little ambitious. We're going to ask everyone to now click gallery view on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. In a moment, I'm going to ask you all to turn your cameras on if they're not already, and unmute yourselves so we can do a l'chaim together and see one another. The mute button is on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So get ready. We're going to do it on the count of 3. Please raise your glass if you have one. It's more fun if we can see you holding your drink. So on the count of 3, we're all going to shout out a big l'chaim together. Wait, ready? Glasses up, unmute. 1, 2, 3. Well done. Beautiful to see so much. I love it. It's so beautiful to see all of you together on this screen. May we all say l'chaim again together safely in person soon. So before we close, we're going to take another quick look at how we're doing with the fundraising tonight. You're going to see it come up on the screen. And ask you to help us keep it going. So let's see, we've already brought in $7,713, but we're trying to get to $20,000 tonight. I really cannot stress how essential your support is to sustaining our struggle for human rights for all people. Every single gift matters. So please, if you haven't texted your gift yet, do so now. The number is 917-970-1782. And if you do it now, you're going to see the screen get higher and higher. We're on our way to $20,000. And I believe that we can do it because the people who can make it happen are here in this room. So you can see the instructions in the chat box now. If you want to make your gift in honor of someone, you can include that in your text message, hit send, and you'll get the reply with a link to enter the payment information. Or you can go to trua.org/give now, and all of this information is here in the chat box. So really, as we prepare to close out the evening, I want to encourage you to send the honorees your mazel tovs in the chat box as Joey closes out our evening with his beautiful music. Thank you so much, each of you, for sharing your time with us. Thank you for being in this work with us. And thank you for heeding the call of the shofar as we continue to fight for justice.
Thank you all so much. It's what a pleasure to be here. I've learned so much tonight and I feel so inspired. And here's a song from one of our favorite, our most famous prayers, the Kaddish. And it says that we have all these ways of giving prayers and lifting ourselves up and lifting others up. And all these ways of giving nechamata, of comfort and of healing for the world. And And we're trying to remember also what is Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, which is what is above all that we're all working towards together. Trua, and please give and give and give. Let's make this happen.